On today's episode of Let's Talk F1, we discuss the Flying Dutchman Max Verstappen. When is he going to win his first World Championship? News about the Formula 1 2020 calendar. Vietnam joins the list. Rob Smedley is out at Williams at the end of the season. Big changes going on there. Sergio Sette joins McLaren as a test driver. All this and more next. Welcome back everyone, or hello for brand new viewers and welcome to Let's Talk F1. This is my sort of weekly podcast, ramble on and talk to you guys for about an hour, sometimes half an hour, but today will definitely be near an hour. We got plenty of stuff to get through, so let's start with the first topic I want to mention, which is Max Verstappen. Now, I don't really talk a lot about drivers on this channel, but I don't really know why. And it suddenly dawned on me last week. I was on stream with the F1 Word and we were talking about Max, and actually it was more focused around Honda. Now, Honda and Christian Horner have started to come out with these big claims that next season they could really be in the running for the World Championship. And while I was talking to Sean, I was thinking to myself, well, I don't really see that happening next year. But at the same time, over the last couple of seasons, especially this season, Max Verstappen, for me, is really blossoming into one of the best, if not the best, driver on the grid. And yes, I could do this in a video all by itself, but I thought this would be a great topic to discuss in a Let's Talk F1 video, because what I love about these videos, /podcast, /talk, /do whatever, is you guys can talk. You guys can have your say in the comments below. This is the video that each week I jump straight into the comments once I'm done. For the rest of the week, even if you're watching this video a week or 2 weeks later, if you have your say in the comments, I'll respond. And we always get great discussions going on in the comments section, and that's really what I love about Let's Talk F1. We have little polls in the top right-hand corner. If you are listening to this on other platforms and not YouTube, then obviously you won't have that ability. But it's just a chance just to sit down and talk, and I am playing with the idea of getting someone else on at the same time with Let's Talk F1, so not just me, but also have like a co-host. But at the same time, I really like this series of just spilling my opinions onto the plate sort of thing and seeing what you guys have to say. And it's more, I see it as a conversation between myself and you guys. So first of all, like I say, we're going to be discussing Max Verstappen. Now, when he came into F1 in 2015, 18 years old. Very, very young to be in Formula 1. Now, I'm only 1 year younger than Max, so even for me, it was quite a surprise to see this guy jump into a Toro Rosso up against Carlos Sainz Jr., almost a recognisable name in the world of motorsports, and take to it like a fish to water. It was a tremendous sight to see. It really was. And although at first I thought there were a few questionable decisions, his attitude towards team orders wasn't great, his relationship with Sainz wasn't great at all, but then there were moments like Hungary, like Spa, when he went around the outside of Blanchimont, which, let's be quite fair, it was the outside of Blanchimont, but the pass was actually done into the bus stop. But it was things like that you could criticise that, alright, he didn't get the pass done through Blanchimont, and the pass at the inside of the bus stop chicane, you know, that's pretty straightforward. But the fact that he had the balls to do that sort of move in his first season of F1 really did show his strength of character. And since then, he's pushed on, and when he had that big switch in 2016 to Red Bull, many people, I won't say myself because I wasn't the biggest Daniel Kvyat fan, but I will say what I did think and everyone else did think was, this is a crazy decision. And Red Bull, if they get this wrong, that's going to be mega. And if you weren't around for 2016, I'll set the scene. So Verstappen was in the Toro Rosso. Kvyat had an okay start to the season, got the team's only podium in Red Bull. Then he had a crash with Sebastian Vettel the race earlier, or the race before the Spanish Grand Prix, and the team demoted Kvyat and promoted Max Verstappen to Red Bull. Kvyat went back to Toro Rosso, and unfortunately for him, that story didn't go so well, and he's left Formula 1 this year, but is making a return next season. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about Max, and Max was given this amazing chance in Spain. The only issue was that Red Bull weren't looking amazing. They were looking great, and obviously it was a huge step up from where he'd been at Toro Rosso, but Mercedes and Nico Rosberg had won almost every single race. Actually, no, not almost, he had. He'd won every single race up to that point, the Spanish Grand Prix. Rosberg was dominating. First lap, Hamilton and Rosberg crash, one of the most infamous crashes, or probably the most famous crash of the hybrid era, presents a real chance for Red Bull and Ferrari to take their first wins of the season. Max Verstappen, his first race for the team, alternate strategy to Daniel Ricciardo and Sebastian Vettel, wins his first ever race with Red Bull, youngest ever man to win a Formula 1 race, and that was a real special day. It really was, and it really put Max Verstappen on the map for a lot of people. Since then, he's won twice at Mexico, including this year. Also this year, he won in Austria. He's won 5 times in his short Formula 1 career, despite only being 21. And yet, he doesn't look anywhere near winning a world championship. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, because the question I'm sort of posing, or going to debate, is when is this guy going to win a world championship? How is he going to do it? Well, currently, he's with Red Bull and has a contract with Red Bull for next season and the season after. So I believe it runs out in 2020, meaning for 2021, he can have a team switch. Red Bull next year are going to a Honda engine, and that's going to be the first sort of thing I want to discuss. So Red Bull, throughout the history of the team, 2005 to date, have always run Renault engines. That was a bit of a tongue twister, wasn't it? But they've run Renault engines, and it's given them a lot of success. 4 successive teams championships and drivers championships, with Sebastian Vettel winning the drivers and Webber being in that team at the same time. However, since the hybrid era, so 2014 to date, Red Bull have struggled, and Renault in particular have been the main reason for that. Arguably this year, Red Bull have the best chassis, but their engine is not up to par. And even though we've seen some great drives from Daniel Ricciardo, great drives from Max Verstappen, the car has not been good enough reliability-wise. Daniel Ricciardo has had 7 retirements, and we have done, 19 races now we've completed, which in Formula 1 terms is a mega amount. That's not even including retirements in qualifying or practice. Max Verstappen, last time out at Mexico, yes, he won the race, but even he broke down in practice. So that's been a huge sticking point for Red Bull this year. But the main thing, like I say, is that Renault engine just is not quick enough in a straight line, does not have these extra, in quotation marks, party modes, as they like to call them. Basically, if you're unaware what they mean by these party modes, the Mercedes engine, the Ferrari engine, and I believe the Honda engine as well this year. Basically, in the final stage of qualifying has this almost extra horsepower mode to make the car go even quicker, that little bit extra. Renault engines don't have this, and it's caused the likes of Red Bull, the likes of McLaren, who also run the Renault engine, to really struggle in qualifying. And it's been a real issue for Red Bull. And that's why, for next season, they're changing to Honda engines. Now, Red Bull's sister team, Toro Rosso, they've been running Honda engines this year, almost as a test, sort of a guinea pig, if you will, to see if it's really worth the gamble. And Red Bull have gone with it. They've said, you know what, Renault, we've had a bit of a toxic relationship over the past few years. We're going to part ways. We're going to gamble on Honda, who this year have looked really strong. However, McLaren were the first team to take the gamble. 2015, McLaren said, right, Mercedes, you've got the best engine, but we want to try something different. We're going to take a gamble. McLaren themselves had a difficult couple of years in 2013 and 2014, a bit like Red Bull have with the Renault engines. But it didn't quite go the way McLaren wanted, so much so that after 3 years with Honda, the Honda partnership, they parted ways, and this year McLaren went back to Renault engines, which unfortunately for them has proved to not really be the right decision. However, that's a topic for another day, because it appears that Toro Rosso have worked a lot more closely and a lot more coherently with Honda than McLaren ever did. So that's a difficult topic to debate and something to talk about on another occasion. But back to Max. He's going to have a Honda engine next year. And like I mentioned earlier, on stream with the F1 Word, we were talking about whether Honda have enough to propel Red Bull to the front. And obviously, if you have watched the stream and you've seen me on there, you've heard all this debate before. But for you guys that haven't really, I'll just sort of summarise what I have to say about next year. And that is, I don't think it's enough. I really don't think the Honda engine is enough. I think it's a step above the Renault engine. Reliability seems a little bit dodgy, if I'm being totally honest, just like the Renault engine. Pace seems similar. It just seems like a really similar package to Renault. And so for next year, I don't really see Red Bull getting any closer to the likes of Ferrari and Mercedes, but I also don't see him going any further back. I think it's almost a like-for-like switch, but it's a difficult one to call. Because Honda, this year in particular, have made such a huge step. If they were to make that same step, then yeah, you're silly not to say that they'd be fighting at the front. But I just don't see that next big step happening quite as quick as next year. But you never know in Formula One, and it could happen. But I don't see that happening. The other factor for next year that might help Max Verstappen is his teammate. So, if you're unaware at the moment, Max Verstappen's teammate is the smiley Aussie himself, the honey badger, Daniel Ricciardo. But he's leaving. He's leaving Red Bull next year. He's going to Renault. Now, that's the last we'll say of Daniel Ricciardo, really. We won't talk about him today. But I will say, I'm not too sure if Gasly is going to be as big a threat as Ricciardo. Now, that's not me mocking Gasly's abilities. It's really not. And I really do highly rate him. But I don't rate him as high as Verstappen, and I don't quite rate him as high as Daniel Ricciardo. That being said, I think Gasly's got time to grow, but next year, Max is going to be that clear number one within Red Bull. I don't care what anyone says, he is going to be that number one, so the team's whole focus will be on Max. And say if the Honda engine is good, then he does have a chance, but I don't see it happening. Honda engine's not going to be quick enough, even with that team backing him. 2019, no, I don't see that happening for Max. 2020, the year after, that's all going to depend on Honda. Now, next year we've got some slightly different aero regulations. Question marks on whether they'll help overtaking, that's why they've been bought in. But Red Bull have the powers of Adrian Newey, the top designer in Formula One, and he's been the man behind these fantastic chassis for all these years. He could be a big influence, not only next year, but especially for 2020 and 2021. Red Bull, a lot of their focus is going to be on Adrian Newey, mainly because the engine, it's not going to be a reliable source for the next few years. Honda is a real gamble. And that's why I think 2019, it's not going to happen. It's a year of embedding Honda into the team. But 2020, that's where the question marks come in. Now, let's look at it first from Max's point of view. Max will have a year with Gasly. Let's say Max comfortably beats Gasly, which I think, to be honest, he might do. But this is early talking, so, don't want to be too critical just yet. But I think if I was going to guess now, I'd say Max is going to do a stronger first season with Gasly than Gasly will. So Max will be the number one. Honda, another year to progress. Mercedes and Ferrari, they'll have another year to progress, but they always say it's a lot easier to catch up than it is to propel. So it'll be easier for Honda to catch up than it will for Mercedes and Ferrari to find extra time. So that's a benefit to Honda. Honda will have been in the sport for 5 years. So for them, 6 years actually, we're talking about 2020, aren't we? So 6 years, Honda will have been in Formula 1. That's plenty of time to get embedded. It's 2 years with the Red Bull group, 1 year with the team Red Bull. This is the first chance that it might happen. Might happen. 2021 is the big regulation change. I think that's more likely than 2020. I think we've got aero regulations next year. 2020, I think they'll tone it down a little bit, keep it very similar to 2019. So then for 2021, the cars will look again radically different. So I think 2020, rules and regulations wise, will look very similar to 2019. On the other hand, something that isn't in Max's favour is the other teams. So on screen there you can see Kimi Räikkönen, but he's not going to be at Ferrari. It's going to be Charles Leclerc, and that's another year Leclerc will have at Ferrari. A very quick Ferrari, that pace is not going to go away. Mercedes, Hamilton, in theory, could be a 6-time world champion going for a 7th world championship. Esteban Ocon at this point could be in the Mercedes. That's a lot of pressure. And that's a lot of talent that Max is going to have to go up against. And I think he's got the skills. He's definitely got the skills to pay the bills. But do Red Bull have the engine to pay the bills? If you catch my vibe. I mean, again, it's a big guessing game. But for 2019, 2020, sorry, Max fans. I just don't see it happening. But 2021 is when it all changes. And I can see Max winning a couple of races 2019. I can see him winning races 2020, but 2021 is the big unknown. Now, 2021 is really going to be the last sort of season I'm going to talk about, mainly because I think Max will stay in Formula 1 for a hell of a long time, and to talk about every year is going to be very difficult, because even talking about next year is so difficult with all the different factors coming in. But 2021 and onwards is the real unknown, which is, I think this is where it's make or break for young Max. 2021, if you didn't know, I've already spoke about it really in this video, but is the big regulation change. With that will come big driver changes. Sebastian Vettel, will he stay in Formula 1? Will Raikkonen still be in Formula 1? Hamilton, will he still be there? Bottas, what will Bottas be doing? Renault, what's Renault's team going to look like? Will Ricciardo still be there? Hulkenberg, Haas, Grosjean and Magnussen, are they going to be there? Who's going to come into the sport? A lot of question marks for 2021. Max himself doesn't have a contract at Red Bull for 2021, and I think that's going to be the key. Because personally, I don't have that much faith in the Honda engine. I really don't. I think it's a great company, Honda. And road cars, hella reliable, great cars. Maybe not the most exotic looking, but solid cars, and you can't argue with that. But on the same side, I'm not too sure whether I trust them enough in Formula 1 to push on to that next level. That being said, Mercedes and Ferrari, their heads are already being slightly turned with Formula E. No news of Honda in Formula E, and that could be a real benefit, especially to Red Bull. Because if Honda's sole focus is on Formula 1, they're going to have extra time, extra money pumped in, extra research and development. That's going to be on their side. But if I'm being honest, I'm not sure I see Max at Red Bull in 2021. If you think about it, started in 16 at Red Bull, going to 2020, that's 5 years within Red Bull. We look at drivers like Vettel, who was in that team from 2009 to 2013. 5 years. Look at Daniel Ricciardo, 2014 to 2018. 5 seasons again. And I think the issue with Red Bull is it's a young driver machine. Meaning, they get a young driver in Toro Rosso, put them into Red Bull, and it's sort of a dead end, almost. I know that's a bit strange to say, but I feel that doesn't really work in other teams. I mean, it's more of a big surprise when a Red Bull driver switches team than maybe a Ferrari driver. If that makes sense. I feel it was a bigger shock that Ricciardo went to Renault than Raikkonen went to Sauber, although that's a little bit different. But I don't know, I always see Red Bull as a very I suppose, helicopter parent team, if that makes any sense. You're part of a family at Red Bull, whereas the other teams, you're an employee, you're a driver. And I think Max, by the time it's 2020, hasn't won a world championship with Red Bull. I think we'll move on. And I think with spaces likely at Ferrari, likely at Mercedes, they're going to be better options. I mean, hell, Renault could make that big push. You never know who's, like I say, who's going to come into the sport. Max could take a big gamble with one of those teams, but I don't see him staying at Red Bull. I really don't. And on screen now, you're seeing images of the Mexican Grand Prix, and I'm thinking, do I see Max in this Red Bull in 2021? How do I even see Red Bull in 2021? If I'm being 100% honest, I think if this Honda engine thing doesn't work out, we've seen rumours for a long time that Red Bull are looking for a way out of Formula 1. And you know what? If this engine doesn't do bits, if this engine does not, it's not going to be up to par, then maybe they'll leave. You know, I could see that happening in 2021. But like I say, I think what's more realistic is Max not staying. But what I would say is 2021 is his first real chance. And if I was going to put money on it, I think you're looking at 2021, Max Verstappen in that fight for the World Championship. If not, his his first ever World Championship. But isn't that a crime? I mean, he's arguably, like I said earlier, one of the best on the grid now. Right now, we want to see him fighting now. But I think realistically, which I don't always do on this channel, focus on the realism. But I think with this, we got to keep a level head because this guy is something special. And I think he's definitely got the ability to be the best of all time. Big statement. Big statement there, but I do. And I think him and Charles Leclerc are going to have a fantastic rivalry throughout Formula 1. I think by the time midway through the 2020s, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, they will be the guys you want to keep your eye on. I think they are, and I think a lot of people are aware of that already, but I think people talk about Norris, Gasly, George Russell, but I don't see that little spark quite like I do with these two, and Max has proved himself now. But it's just a shame that I just don't see it happening anytime soon. So, as always, I want to know what you guys think in the comments. Are Red Bull going to be able to turn this around? I don't see it. I really don't. But at the same time, Max's abilities, that is clear now. And I'll tell you what, at the beginning of the year, the Orange Army, I imagine there's a lot of you here, so welcome. You gave me a bit of hate, Orange Army, at the beginning of the year. In my predictions, Max Verstappen wasn't that high, was he? If some of you were here then, I'd take that back. And although at the beginning of the year, it looked like I was on the right track, honestly, I can't say it enough these days. Max, for me, 100% is in my top 3 on the grid, if not my top 2. But I think this guy will win World Championships, just not soon, and not with Red Bull. So, yeah, I want to know what you think. I want to know if you think he's going to win at all. Because he could be almost Fernando Alonso, Kimi Raikkonen-esque sort of driver. Kimi Raikkonen, if you're not aware, 2004, 5, 6, arguably was the best driver around. Alonso won the championships, but Raikkonen was smashing it. Even in 2007, probably he wasn't the man who deserved to win that year. Very strange career, Kimi Raikkonen, but Fernando Alonso again. Many people, even though I'd agree that, I suppose, after 2006, all the way up to present day, he's been one of the best on the grid. Hasn't really had that many opportunities, maybe 2 or 3 opportunities, clear opportunities to win the World Championship, and hasn't. So, even saying that, Max could be the best of all time, doesn't guarantee championships. If you can't get yourself in the right place at the right time, if Leclerc and Ferrari are going to keep powering on, if Hamilton stays, then big question marks. But if I was going to put money on it, you don't go against the Verstappen. You really don't. The Lion, the Flying Dutchman, whatever you want to call him, this guy's something special. And I think, just like Hamilton was when he came into Formula 1, you've got to keep your eye on him. So, that's pretty much what I have to say on this topic. Spoke half an hour almost about Max Verstappen. Love that. Love that. And it's definitely going to be something, talking about drivers, that I really want to do in the future. So, Max there leading the Mexican Grand Prix. Enjoyed that. Love to know your thoughts in the comments below. So, next story then. Moving on from Max, but unfortunately, not unfortunately, but we'll be talking about him again in a minute. So, this is a very Max Verstappen, Orange Army heavy episode, but this is for you guys. I know there's loads of you out there, and like I said, I don't give Max enough recognition, so this is a special episode for you guys. So, thank you for your support, and of course, for anyone else who's listening, thank you for that. But, Hanoi. I can't pronounce words very well, but that's what's coming to the F1 2020 World Calendar. I will say that I always used to, when I was a kid, I always used to call it Hanoi. But apparently now I'm just completely wrong, a complete idiot. So, Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam, the new country to host an F1 race. Rumours have been around for quite some time, made official a couple of days ago, and we're going to go through the circuit layout. So you saw a big map there, but breaking it down a little bit more. So we'll go through the layout, then I'll talk about what I feel about having a track in Vietnam. So turns 1 and 2 then. Big straight heading towards turn 1. Not the biggest on the calendar, but still a sizable run down to turn 1. Now, there is a helicopter going by my house right now, so if you can hear that, I apologise. But if you're in the helicopter, hello. Anyways, down to turn 1, they've used the example of the Nürburgring, turns 1 and 2. That's the picture on the right-hand side of the screen. The start line, if you're not aware of this track, is on the right-hand side of that little picture, and you head down towards, and that's a right-hand turn, whereas this is a left-hand turn. They're right, it's very similar to the Nürburgring. A really little fancy section of corners, that is, and I think the Nürburgring, a couple of, I suppose, I was going to say dodgy sectors, but a difficult track for overtaking. But turn 1 and 2 was a fantastic watch, especially in opening laps. So that's a great addition for this circuit. Then we move on quite a bit for some reason. These are the official F1 pictures. We move quite a bit longer into the circuit. Turns 12, 13, 14 and 15. Designed to be like the hill at Monaco. So says turns 1 and 2 there on the right hand side, but really it's turns 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way up the hill. Now, as you can see in Monaco, like it will be on this circuit, I imagine it's more of a straight than it is turns. So the fact that they've labelled them as turns on the Vietnamese circuit does make me think, is this more of a, I suppose, a Maggots and Beckett's from Silverstone, just where not really any overtaking opportunities, but it's a spectacle? Might be. I'm a little bit more cautious on that one. Doesn't really look like an overtaking opportunity. And then a little bit later on in the circuit, again we have these funny sort of S sections, Maggots and Beckett's, Cota section 1, and like they have used, Suzuka turns 2 to 6. Now, I do question these sort of, I suppose, parts of a circuit, because I suppose nowadays a big complaint is the fact that there's no overtaking, and these sections never really provide overtaking opportunities. So if you look into the entrance of 16, maybe 16, 17, but when you get into 18, 19, I think you're really going to struggle. But that's the sort of main areas that they have shown off. And it doesn't look too bad. That's my sort of initial track layout thoughts. There you go, there's the big picture. And I think this picture does a little bit more justice of what the circuit is actually like. And really, they haven't shown it in any of the diagnostic pictures, but it's just long straights. And I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure. One of the big reasons that I was for a circuit in Vietnam, a street circuit, which supposedly this is a street circuit, is that something Formula E does very well is brings the racing to the people, and to the people it presents a new sport. And if they love the sport, then it presents a great chance for revenue to come into the city, different medias to get attention on the city. And I think for a country like Vietnam, that's more, I suppose, stereotyped as a country involved in war. I think nowadays it's a beautiful place, and I think that's fantastic for the country. On the other hand, this circuit it's not really a street circuit. It's a more out of the way, half purpose built, half street circuit, which is quite strange. It's not right in the heart of the city. You can see there on screen where the heart of the city is, and it's not really there. It's more on this little island that you can see on the right hand side of your screen. It's a little bit odd, but circuit layout, I'm fine with it. Long straights, questionable. Hairpins, a nice addition. But I think what I've learned, especially in these last couple of years, is that circuit layout's one thing, but the layout of a circuit does not determine racing. It really doesn't. I mean, aero regulations next year could be so crazy slipstream that this circuit could be the best of all time. We just don't know until we show up. And Azerbaijan, great racing the last 2 years. Its first year was awful racing. And if you ask me, if you look at it on paper, an awful circuit layout. But once you're actually down there on the ground, I mean, the castle section is one of my favourite sections on any circuit. It really is. And yet, it's not really an overtaking opportunity. It's more of a spectacle. You're more, oh my god, how did they not hit the barriers? That's more the reaction. So, I don't want to judge too much. The circuit has not been built. There will be some purpose-built areas, so it's not going to be all street circuit. And I imagine a lot of this area will be built up and modernised, and a lot of money will be pumped into this area because Formula 1 is coming. So I think it's too early to judge on that sort of area. But I think the bigger topic and the bigger debate around this Grand Prix is, why have we got a Vietnamese Grand Prix? Obviously, I said, it's a country that needs a lot more positive exposure. It brings a lot of money to the area. Actually, I will say, I think this is the better diagram of the circuit. I'm sorry I've got my logo in the top left blocking half of it, but you can almost work out what it's like. But I think the reason they've gone with this is because it's a new market. Now, there were a lot of other options, which we'll talk about in a second, but I think the big reason for Liberty is that they want to expand Formula 1. They've got their current fan base, the die-hard fan base. I mean, you guys here and myself, we are the die-hards, let's be honest. But there's some guys, well, guys and girls, in countries that rarely get to see Formula 1. I mean, America, Liberty are making a big push in North America. Brought back the Mexican Grand Prix, talks of a Miami Grand Prix. But Asia as well. I mean, last year they had the Malaysian Grand Prix taken away. How many tracks have they got there now? 3? Singapore, well, I suppose Russia, I think that's the European side of Russia. But we've got Singapore, Japan, China. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else. Azerbaijan is in Europe. It's supposedly the European Grand Prix, but I don't think they call it that anymore. If I'm missing any, I apologise. But I think that's it these days. Which is a big shame. Abu Dhabi. But considering it's a market that is a huge market in general, but for Formula 1 is a major market, to have it in a country like Vietnam, which has never experienced Formula 1, I'm all for. I really am. And you look at the amount of races in Europe and compare it to everywhere else in the world, it's a crazy amount. So, I'm for it. Let's go there. Let's give it a chance. No one gave Azerbaijan a chance. Even after that first year, everyone said it was a waste of time. Now look what's happened the next 2 years. So you can't write a circuit off until you're there. But I don't think that's really what people are peed off about. I think what people are peed off about which I suppose I was to a degree, is that we have circuits like Silverstone, like the German Grand Prix, like Monza, that are under threat, that after this year, or next year, really, might never be on the calendar again. We've seen circuits over the years like Malaysia, like San Marino, Imola. We've seen races like these vanish off the calendar. India, which was only brought on in 2011, I want to say, 2011, maybe, only did 3 or 4 Grand Prix. A circuit purpose-built for Formula 1 taken away after 3 or 4 years. Despite India, there's a huge market for Formula 1 there. So should Liberty Media focus more on those issues with circuits, especially the British Grand Prix? Not saying that because I'm British, but because it is the most watched race of the year, the most attended race of the year, which I suppose there's a lot of casual viewers that watch Formula 1 that way, and I suppose with the English market being the biggest current market for Formula 1, that is still a key area that Liberty want to keep getting young fans from England, from the UK, to watch Formula 1. And it's a big dilemma they're focusing on at the moment, and it's one they've really got to decide on what they want to do. We've also got news, rumours, that countries like Zandvoort, going back to the Orange Army and Max Verstappen fans, I know on my channel, analytics-wise, you guys make up 10% of my viewership. I think it's maybe the 4th largest region on my channel, which says something. There's a hell of a lot of you guys out there, which is great. But the fact you don't have your own home race, I mean, I know my percentage-wise, only about 1% of my viewership is German. And the only reason I'm doing viewership isn't no bragging or anything. I'm not using numbers like that. But it's, I suppose, the only analytics I can use to quantify sort of the percentage of fans. So it will be wrong, of course, but it's the best I can do. I only have about 1% German viewership. And so that's 10 times the German viewership that the Netherlands has. And the fact that they don't have a race and haven't had a race since the 80s, I believe, that's a crazy amount of time. And most of them go to Spa. I know when I went to Spa, there was a lot of you guys there. But I think circuits like that, even if it's not Zandvoort, just another purpose-built circuit, or even a street circuit, whatever, I think that's more important. And I personally think that's what they should put their focus into, as well as a US one. We've got one US Grand Prix, but the size of the US, let's be honest, is it fair to just have the one? I mean, does the effects of the Austin Grand Prix have any effect in Washington? On the complete, almost other side of the country? No, of course it doesn't. I mean, yes, it's great to say we've got a US Grand Prix. It's called the Circuit of the Americas, or COTA, as I referred to earlier. If you didn't know what that meant, I apologise. But I suppose what I'm saying here is that's the dilemma, isn't it? Should they focus more on current fans, or should they expand? But if I'm being honest, I think Liberty Media have got their heads screwed on. I think what they're going to do is, with this announcement, I think very shortly we'll have an announcement that we're keeping a race, whether that be Monza, whether that be, well, I suppose we've just had the news that Hockenheim, the German Grand Prix, is staying for another couple of years. So I suppose we had that news. Now we've got news of Vietnam. I reckon we'll have news of Zandvoort. I really do. I mean, those rumours have been going around so much. It'd be such a huge missed opportunity for Liberty Media. I think one of each. I think that's what they'll do. We've got a historic race staying. We've got a brand new location and a historic location coming back. And this is a trend that Formula One's done for a little while now. I mean, we had Silverstone save for a little while. Then we had Mexico come back. And then we had a new circuit in Azerbaijan. So I think that sort of model works, keeping everyone happy as best you can. But initial reaction on this race is, let's just go with it, I suppose. A little bit more of a laid-back approach. I don't really have any crazy opinions on it. I'm just ready for another race. And I'm all for more races on the calendar. I really am. I know a lot of people say, oh, 25 that's out of hand. That's crazy. But is it? I mean, it's only, what, 4 more weekends over the year? And people say, oh, but the guys at the factory, that's more work, this, that, and the other. But they don't have time off. They don't have time off when it's not a race weekend. They still do their 9 to 5 days. The only guys it really affects is the guys that go to the circuit, a lot more flying and travelling. But that being said, when they come home, they just do work anyway. So that argument, I don't really get too much. But I do get that there is a limit. You know, there's only 52 weekends in the year. We've got to fit in testing. I suppose we have to have a summer break these days, which I hate and I think they should get rid of. But if they have to have it, they have to have it. And we've got to have a winter break for cars to be developed for this winter testing. So there does have to be a limit. I think 21 fits quite well. I don't think it's awful, but at the same time, if we had 4 more races, there'd be no complaints from my end. So, Vietnam, what do you guys think? I'd love to know in the comments below, as always. Is there anything I haven't mentioned that you guys want to bring up as well? That'd be interesting to know. But we've been going for 40 minutes now. We've got 2 more stories to go before we wrap up this one. This has been a really nice and long one. A real back to form for Let's Talk F1. So if you haven't made it this far, thanks for listening. It does... I do find it a bit crazy, but let's move on to the next story then. And this is around Rob Smedley, which you know, just happens to be a really strange surname to say. And, well, for me anyway, Smedley, I find... I don't know, I feel I don't pronounce it correctly, so apologies, no offence. No offence is meant there, Rob, but... Rob, Ferrari legend, team engineer, Felipe Massa while at Ferrari, some infamous team radio chats. I mean, Felipe, I have the white visor, baby. Awful impression. We'll forget that happened, but all sorts of crazy, quick-witted one-liners between him and Felipe Massa was always great to hear. The most famous team radio of all time, maybe. Fernando is faster than you. I mean, if you haven't heard that one before, learn it. Learn that one. Basically, a huge team order scandal, letting Fernando Alonso pass Felipe Massa while Massa was leading the German Grand Prix in 2010. Rob Smedley gave the call. But when Massa went to Williams in 2014, Rob said, you know what, I'm coming with you, and wasn't in the same role that he had at Ferrari. And in fact almost became, I don't want to say head of design, but it was almost that sort of role, lead overseer, something like that. It wasn't quite as involved on race days like he was at Ferrari, but still very much involved in the picture at Williams. Now, he has decided to leave, or at least at the end of the year he'll be stepping down from his position, and isn't currently known what he's going to be doing, which is quite interesting. And I know for some of you guys, you don't really care about this too much, but I'm not going to talk about it forever. You know, we got a limited amount of time to work with here, and I prefer the next story after this. But I still think this is one that we've got to look at, because Rob Smedley, arguably one of the most famous guys at Williams, and what I mean by that is one of the most high-profile, that's the word I'm looking for, phrase, high-profile guys at Williams, a big name in the team. They've lost already a lot of big names within the team this year. Especially on the technical side and the aero side. They're losing... Well, I suppose that they're losing their most experienced driver in Lance Stroll. They've lost Lawrence Stroll as one of their big investors. Martini is leaving. And that's just... on, I suppose, the business side of things, aerodynamically, they've lost some big names that I've really just tried to rack my brain to think of, but I cannot think, which I do apologise. But they've still got Paddy Lowe. One benefit. They've still got a huge infrastructure of, I suppose, homegrown talent within that team. Something that Williams really try and push. So I don't think it'll be the end of the world that Rob Smedley's leaving, but this is off the back of some difficult years for Williams. 2014, great. 3rd in the Constructors' Championship. 15, I think they were fourth in the constructors, or fifth. They were fifth in the constructors. 16, I believe they were fifth again, but this year, slum last. It's been a decline. There's no arguing that. Felipe Massa's now gone. He's got no reason to stay there. He's been in Formula 1 for what seems like forever. He's been in Formula 1 ever since I've been watching. He wants a break, and you can't argue with that too much. But I think there's two ways you can look at this move. Either this is Williams still trying to go for this big clear out, which I think they are. You know, there's all these stories about all these guys leaving, but I think Williams really need a big sort out, a big refresh. Hit the big refresh button. I nearly smashed the desk there to emphasise that, but I also didn't want an awful noise down your headphones or whatever, so I apologise that I did not do that. But is it a refresh, or is this panic stations? You know, I see it more as a refresh. I'm a little bit more calm on the situation. I don't know why I'm so calm today, but we are. Chill vibe, but I feel this is a reset. I feel this is a mutual sort of decision. I think it will be a loss to Williams. Of course it will, with all his experience and knowledge. Of course it's going to be a loss, but it's an opportunity for something new, someone fresh, someone, I suppose, from lower down in the company to come up. If you didn't know, Toto Wolff came from lower down in the Williams setup. He wasn't a team principal, team manager. He was on the business side of things, got shifted over to that role, and look where he is now. 4 times Constructors World Champions in a row. It's about to be 5. I mean, you can't really argue with that, can you? So, Williams, I think, has definitely got one of the best, I suppose, scouting networks, really, and training networks there is in Formula 1. I do believe that. It's just whether they got the right guy at the right time. Or do they bring in someone from the outside, which I suppose, if you're coming from the outside, is not the most, how do I put this, luxurious option, let's say, especially if you're a team higher up. So, it's a difficult one. The panic station side of things, yeah, this is another big name leaving Williams, and Claire Williams, her head could be on the chopping block. It really could. I don't think it will be. Like I say, I'm a lot more calm about this situation. I need to really think of some ideas for panic stations, because I feel I'm drifting just back into the good side. So panic stations then. They've lost Rob Smedley. Let's be a bit more aggressive here. They've lost Rob Smedley. Another guy lost last this year. Drivers, they've got George Russell coming in, and they could go with another paid driver. Sorokin could stay. Limited experience, that end of things. It's not going to be an easy fix at Williams. This won't help. You know, let's be honest on that side of things. This won't help. But like I say, I suppose I'm going to end it here, because you can tell I'm more of a, I suppose, laid back on this sort of situation. But I think give them time. Give them time. I think what's going to happen with Williams, a couple of years at the back. And I think they can learn from McLaren, actually. McLaren started to drift backwards. They definitely hit the panic stations. And look what's happened. This mess of contracts here, there, and everywhere. Now with Renault this year, yes, they're going to be back at the front. And where are they? They've not even made progress over the year. They've gone backwards. And I think next year we'll be at the back with Williams. Williams they won't want to follow that same model. And so despite Smedley leaving, I think they need a big clear out. I think they do. They know there's issues there. I think Paddy Lowe, we've seen he's a great aerodynamicist. Can really build some great cars. If you don't know who he was at Mercedes 2014, 15 and 2016, helped design those cars. So that really shows you this guy's abilities. He's not an Adrian Newey, that's for sure. So big question marks at Williams. And this is the one, actually, I'd love to know your thoughts. If you know a lot about this, or even just have any sort of thoughts on this, I'd love to know, because I think this is a real difficult situation Williams are in. So we'll see. We'll see. And I suppose that's where I'm going to end this one, because I don't want to ramble on too much. And I want to move on to our final story, which is to do with another struggling British team that I just mentioned, McLaren. Now, for next year, if you're unaware, McLaren are having 2 brand new drivers. Whoop-de-doo. Stoffel Van Dorn is out. Fernando Alonso is out. In come Carlos Sainz, experienced Spaniard, and rookie Lando Norris. But this week we've had the news that almost another rookie will be joining the team next year. Lando Norris' teammate in Formula 2, and that is Sergio Sette Camara. Now, usually, I don't really talk too much about reserve drivers. I did talk about Daniel Kvyat, but I think apart from that, at the beginning of the year, that's the only time I've ever spoken about reserve drivers. So, why am I talking about it today? Well, Sette Camara, I suppose, is the next real Brazilian hope in Formula 1, which I suppose is a sad thing to say in a sense, because he's fine. You know, he's proved himself in Formula 2, a couple of wins, plenty of podiums, but in his second year of Formula 2, in a competitive car, teammate to Lando Norris, hasn't quite set the world on fire. And I think if he ever does get into Formula 1, it'll be almost like, I suppose, a Sorokin, where someone's in desperate need of a driver. He's not awful. And I think he's definitely shown a good amount of talent in Formula 2. I suppose I'm almost going to say to warrant a chance in Formula 1. I think this is perfect for him. I really do. We've seen drivers like Esteban Ocon, Jerome D'Ambrosio. I don't know why I chose D'Ambrosio. Jolyon Palmer. Start as test drivers. Pascal Wehrlein start as test drivers, then move into a race seat. And there's a mix there of ones that worked and didn't work. And I think this guy, maybe he'll be a bit like a Jerome D'Ambrosio. Doesn't really ever get an amazing seat in Formula 1. But if he does get a chance, he'll take it. And I can see this guy, I suppose, at the likes of a Williams maybe, a Sauber maybe, even a Toro Rosso perhaps if they need a driver, because he is talented. And I think if you're going to look at the pool of drivers from Formula 2 this year, I'd put him in my top 5. I think I would. I think you're looking at Lando Norris, George Russell, Artem Markelov, Alex Albon, and then on the edge you're talking Nick De Vries, Sergio Sette Camara. Who else? We got Luca Giotto. But I think Camara, I would probably put above those other guys, Nick De Vries, and probably maybe alongside. So top 6, we'll say top 6, because I think Nick De Vries some days can be better. So anyway, he's a solid driver. He's had 2 years in F2 now, which if you don't follow F2, it's, I'd say, rare for drivers to do more than 2 seasons. And I'm glad he's got this chance in Formula 1. And I suppose I'm glad to see Formula 2 drivers getting a chance this year. I was going to do a separate Formula 2 report, but I felt this news wasn't big enough for that. But it's another good driver with a lot of potential in Formula 2 that's coming into Formula 1. And it really makes you think that, I suppose, Raikkonen making this step down to Sauber, although it's great, these seats are still needed. They're still needed, a lot of these seats. And next year we're going to have another batch of fantastic Formula, I suppose, 3, GP3, I suppose Renault drivers, Renault 3.5. All of these guys coming into Formula 2. I suppose that some of us have never heard of before, that are going to set the world on fire. That's going to happen. I mean, Callum Ilott, Dan Ticktum, Mick Schumacher, to name 3, I suppose, high-profile ones. That's just 3. That's just 3. And I don't know. I'm really happy with this. It's great seeing young drivers get a chance, especially the likes of Camara, who probably, like I say, won't ever get a real chance in Formula 1, but a big team has given him a chance. And I think that's really nice. And it's better than the likes of, I suppose, let's try and not be disrespectful, but Esteban Gutierrez, I suppose. He is test driver at Mercedes at the moment, and I think that's a real shame, because he's had his time in Formula 1. He wasn't quick enough. Give some of these younger guys that, I suppose, might not get a chance in Formula 1, but can do a solid job, and I think that's really nice to see. And I suppose it's a positive note to end the podcast on, end the video on. Wow, an hour. I think this could be the longest episode we've done of Let's Talk F1. And we spoke a lot. We have spoke a lot of topics today. But I'd love to know what you have to say on a lot of them. Well, I suppose all of them, really. Maybe not so much Sete Camara, because he's almost, I don't want to be disrespectful again and say an unknown, but he is really, and it's only a reserve driver role that could blossom into something in the future, but I doubt it. Maybe if Norris really struggles, or Sainz really struggles against Norris, and Camara's doing well in practice sessions behind closed doors, then maybe they'll give him a go. I doubt it, of course, but I suppose if Norris or Sainz get a ban, Camara will come in. But I suppose what I really want to know is your thoughts on Verstappen. I really love that conversation, so I'd love to keep that going in the comments below, as well as Vietnam. What are your thoughts on that? Because that is a crazy situation going on there, and it's got a lot of backlash. Something that I don't really agree with, but I'd love to know your thoughts behind it if you do agree with it. So, you don't have to. Of course, you don't have to, but it's great to see you guys here as always. And if you've made it this far, it'd mean the world to me if you could drop a subscribe, hit the bell. I never tell anyone to hit the bell, but apparently it's something I should be doing because the YouTube algorithm is a wonderful thing, and I've definitely learned that over my short time here on the platform. And if you want to like, if you have enjoyed, then please feel free. Thank you guys for watching or listening as always, and I'll see you in the next one.